Hi, beautiful people. Welcome to the Fort Salem Library, where we read you your fanfiction. So sit down or don't, relax or don't, and enjoy these stories in a way you have not before. We at Fort Salem Library do not own Motherland Fort Salem or any of the related characters. The Motherland Fort Salem series is created by Elliot Lawrence and owned by Freeform. This story is a work of fanfiction and is meant for entertainment only. We are not making any profit from these stories. All rights of the original Motherland Fort Salem story belong to Freeform. We also do not own Fireside Take Two or any of its original characters and storylines. We did, however, get permission from the author to read their story. This story was created and written by Gesshoo, and you can find the link in our show notes. This story is being read to you by Britt. Fireside Take Two, Chapter 2. Salem is a frozen hellscape on the sixth night of Fireside. Ice and snow abound, coating every surface across bays as far as the eye can see. The night is, at the very least, free of rain. A blessing from the goddess herself, after a week of precipitation so maddeningly non-stop that even Tally, who'd been deprived of proper winters her entire childhood, and thus loved the snow, is worn thin and ready to risk going AWOL, just to salva herself somewhere tropical. The fire inside the Sekhmet gazebo, and the enchantments containing its warmth, however, do wonders for the coven's collective mood. The five of them are dressed down in their civvies, comfortable jeans and sweats and thermals, wool socks and boots to keep their feet dry and warm. Abigail, the only one of the bunch who refuses to abandon all style for the sake of comfort, has accessorized to the point of somehow making sweatpants fashionable. Rule number 4 of being a high Atlantic, she says. There are no excuses for ugly. There's no way that's a real rule, Tilly says with a laugh, as Em hands her a goblet of wine. Her first of the night, despite being at least an hour into Fireside. After the first 2 nights of celebration, she had switched to water and hot chocolate, her liver thanking her for the break. But she has a craving for that heady, heavy fog the wine gives her, the buzz in her brain that makes everything feel less and more at the same time. So she takes the wine and sips it, and welcomes the way it slithers down her throat and settles thickly in her stomach. Raelle, in her corduroy pants and hoodie, pokes Gregorio's shoulder. Gigi, you're a HA. Confirm the rules. He smirks and points at his face. Look at me. He smoothly swipes a hand over his pristine hair, perfectly greased and styled despite the rest of the coven, save Abigail, looking like they had just rolled themselves out of bed prior to arrival. Look at this hair. Abigail cackles and reaches across to high-five him, just barely keeping her arm out of the fire. She's 3 small goblets of wine into their night, and delightfully buzzed. Gregorio slaps her hand proudly as the others laugh. I still don't buy it, Em says. There's no way your parents just openly say that shit to you. Do they say it? Raelle asks after a pleasantly sharp sip of her whiskey-spiked hot chocolate she'd bribed of Anacostia the day before. Or is there like an actual High Atlantic rulebook you guys have to read? Do they say it? Gregorio repeats with a scoff, and Abigail snorts. Gigi had a cowlick when we were kids. And his second dad literally took him to an alchemist to have a potion brewed to fix it. Tilly's jaw drops open as Raelle wheezes out a harsh laugh, and Gregorio simply grimaces. He said it was unruly and unpleasant and would hinder his ability to find a proper match, Abigail tells them, in front of me, like, I was there when he said this. We were in etiquette class. Etiquette class? Raelle laughs even harder, then shakes her head and raises a drink. So glad my tween years were normal. Well, as normal as they can be when you're a girl and a witch, and your mom is deployed, and your family is flat broke, but, you know, minor details or whatever. Oh, we weren't teens, Abigail says, and Gregorio's grimace somehow deepens. We were 7, he says, and gasps ring the group again. No, Raelle says. Oh no, my guy. She pats his knee. That's horrible. He nods sadly. Truly, we suffered, he says dramatically. Then he and Abigail look at each other in something akin to mutual misery. A second later, Abigail cracks with a smile, and Gregorio mimics it. Well, I, for one, liked your cowlick, Gigi, she says, and Rael, Tally, and Em all raise their glasses. Hear, hear, they chant together. And Gregorio laughs and raises his goblet to join. Thank you, friends. I bet you were adorable, Tally says. Unruly hair and all. He really was, Abigail tells him. Annoying, for sure, but cute. Huh, thanks, Bells. Gregorio laughs. And for the record, I liked your buck teeth, too. Abigail gasped in horrendous. But it's nothing compared to the collective shock of her sisters. You swore you'd never tell. You low-down, sniveling seed-mangler. She all but screams at Gregorio, who has already fallen onto Rael's shoulder, laughing so hard he nearly spills his wine. Even Libba never told, and she was the absolute worst person I ever loved. Gregorio wheezes and holds his stomach. That's only because she was afraid you'd tell about her toe. Her toe? Tally, Rael, and Em are horribly, greedily invested at this point, and Rael cannot stop cycling between cackling and gasping. She's one more revelation away from sounding like a donkey mid-bray. There's no way Abigail Bellwether ever had buck teeth, Em says. Like, I refuse to believe this. Good, Abigail shouts, because it is a lie, and offensive. Horrid lie from a liar's lying mouth. You just confirmed it like 10 seconds ago, Rael says, and tosses a cushion at her. She ducks to miss it, and they watch it fly out of the gazebo and into the cold. They all stop, choking on their laughs and protests, as the cushion is snatched from the air by an elderly hand. It's Enid's hand. She latches onto the cushion and pulls it to her chest to protect it as she and the other biddies hover around the outside of the gazebo. At the fore is the general herself, and like the biddies, she wears standard uniform except for a thin coat and scarf. The scarf apparently decorative, because it lays uselessly open around her shoulders, while her neck and sharp-angled face remain uncovered and beaten pink by the cold. Well, Sekhmet is certainly lively this evening, Sarah says, one brow raised and just a hint of a smile touching one corner of her mouth. Launching my biddies' cushions like cannons. What, may I ask, would inspire such a declaration of war? Abigail's eyes widen and she nearly topples herself into the fire with how quickly she whirls towards Rael. The girl's mouth is already open to answer, but Abigail raises a finger and points it sharply at her. Do not even dare, Rael Collar, or so help me, you will regret it every day for the rest of your life. Rael's mouth snaps shut, face guilty and terrified, just as Tally's opens. But wouldn't Sarah already know about it, Abby? She knew you when you were little. Indeed I did, Sarah says, as she motions for the biddies to file into the gazebo, each of the elderly women sighing with relief as they circle into the warmth. Enid smacks Rael on the back of her head with the cushion she tossed, then promptly settles down behind her. Okay, but the biddies didn't, Abigail argues. At least not these biddies. Lucy chuckles as she settles onto a cushion behind Gregorio. We have all her memories, Abigail. If Sarah saw it, sees it, knew it, or knows it, so did and do we. Sarah settles her cushion beside Tally and lowers herself down. Her slight smile expands just a touch as Tally automatically rests a hand on her knee, comfortable and easy, affectionate. She then turns her attention back to Abigail. Lucy is right, Abigail, she says. If it is something I've experienced or witnessed, they will each have the knowledge of it. So you might as well say it, since Blanche's curiosity is now burning hot enough to scorch a hole through my brain. Tally chuckles and leans into Sarah's shoulder. Abigail apparently had buck teeth when she was little. Rael tries to hold her laugh in, but it spills free anyway, her whiskey-laden hot chocolate having loosened her beyond control. Please tell me you remember this, she says, and Sarah grins as the others all chuckle. Certainly I do. They were darling. No, they were not, Abigail groans, pulling her shirt up over her face to hide her mortification. They totally were, Lucy says, her eyes now closed. I'm looking at them right now. Stop, Abigail whines. But Rael has already all but clambered into Lucy's lap, begging her to link with her long enough to see for herself. Em leans over to pat Abigail's shoulder. It's okay, Bells, they say. Everyone's got something. Oh yeah? Abigail challenges, popping back out of her shirt like a turtle emerging from its shell. And what do you have? A rocking bod, Em says. It's a curse, honestly. So many people want a piece of this. Abigail! Raelle suddenly screams. Her eyes are closed, and her forehead is pressing to Lucy's, and Lucy is laughing at the words shouted in her face. You're so fucking cute! Like a precious baby beaver! Abigail keels over on her cushion. I am going to launch myself into the fire. She looks to Tally for help, but Tally's conflicted, guilty expression makes her narrow her eyes. Do not even think about linking with her too. Raelle's seeing is bad enough. Let me have my dignity. But she said it was cute. Tally juts out her bottom lip, pouting. Like a baby beaver. I love beavers. No, Tally, never. Sarah chuckles and leans over. She turns her face in toward Tally's ear, nuzzling her nose along the edge of Tally's cheek, and whispers, I will show you later. Tally has to stop herself from squealing. She then gasps and jabs Sarah's knee in her sudden excitement. So does that mean you know about Libba's toe too? Her toe? Joanna, seated behind Abigail, raises a gray brow. Was something wrong with her toe? She had an extra one, Sarah says simply with a shrug of her shoulder. It's actually not all that uncommon among our kind. Tally is giggling as she says, That's so true. There were at least 3 girls on the compound who had extra digits. Ew, Tal, don't say digits, Raelle says as she turns in her seat. You know I hate it. Yeah, but you are weird, Tally counters. Oh, and this one girl, Flora Fedler. She was like a year older than me, I think. She had 2 extra toes on her left foot. She was super proud of them, too. I want this entire conversation to cease, Abigail says with another sharp groan. And the entire gazebo crumbles into laughter. Even Sarah guffas at Abigail's obvious misery. Sarah, you're a high Atlantic, Raelle says after a minute. Is rule number 4 real, or are these assholes screwing with us? She nudges her head toward Gregorio again. And then Abigail. Rule number 4, Sarah asks, brow furrowing, then, there are no excuses for ugly? Raelle and Tally both gasp as Sarah barrels into a deep laugh. Tally shoves her. That's not funny, she says. I honestly thought they were joking, but it is so mean. Who would say that to the children? I'm messing with you, Tally, Sarah admits, a shit-eating grin plastered over her face. She bumps Tally's shoulder with her own, then nods toward the cold dark surrounding the gazebo. We were standing just outside the gazebo listening to you all for at least 5 minutes before anyone noticed us. Tally's squeal laughed and shoved Sarah again. You're awful, she says, and Sarah's smile only widens. I know. She knows, the biddies repeat in unison. Now, Sarah says with a clap of her hands, shall we start the blessings before you all descend any further into your varying states of inebriation? You're not planning on being inebriated with us this year, Raelle asks with an unmistakable pout. But last year was so fun, especially when Tally almost killed herself with cheese, because she thought you were hot. Tally's entire face colors itself a shade to match the flickering fire, but she's a good enough sport to laugh at herself. I will avoid the cheese this time. I'm afraid I will still be hot regardless, Sarah tells her, so best to avoid all foods. Raelle wheezes out a laugh. Oh man, I kinda love you when you're not being all General Aldery. She holds up her goblet and says, also, I've got whiskey hot chocolate, and Acostia made it. Sarah rolls her eyes as she stands and straightens her uniform. I made it, she says, and Acostia stole it. One of several of her skills I rather frown upon. She holds out a hand for Tally to help her to her feet. This year, I will start with Tally's blessing. And as you all may remember, if you weren't too out of your minds drunk, once the individual blessings are finished, I will perform a coven blessing, and then we may carry on with the night's festivities. Agreed? The witches nod in unison and bow their heads. Tally watches them each close their eyes, then focus on the feeling of Sarah's hands in hers. Her eyes meet Sarah's electric blue, and Tally sighs, comforted. For a year, she'd been staring into those eyes every chance she got, and for a year, Sarah had stared right back, and now, when they look at each other this way, They aren't strangers, or soldiers, or one pining for another. They know each other. They know each other. And Tally can't help herself. She has the tingling buzz of wine in her belly and brain, and she releases one of Sarah's hands to reach up and cup her angled cheek instead. Sarah doesn't say anything, only smiles at her, her nose wrinkling with the pull of it. She pulls Tally's palm to her lips and presses a kiss into it, then drops their hands back between them and slides her fingers up until she's gripping Tally's wrists. "We begin," she announces, and Tally almost instantly feels the power in the air. It radiates off Sarah in colorful waves, painted not only by her voice, but by her intention. The other witches in the circle hum to match her energy, and collectively it finds its appropriate stride. Tally does her best to calm the heat in her belly as Sarah's touch reminds her of their earlier activities. Sarah had been positively insatiable throughout the entirety of Yule, and Tally had ended up on her back more times than she could count over the last few days. She blows out a slow, easy breath and centers her mind as Sarah holds her tight and steady. To think, just last year, she'd been shaken to her core by the feeling of Sarah's hands in hers, Sarah's skin on her skin. Now, it's a simple fact of her life, every day, and goddess. Tally has never been more grateful for anything. She almost giggles at the thought, how far they've come in such a short period of time. Sarah waits patiently for Tally's energy to calm, then, "Are you ready?" Tally nods, and Sarah rubs her thumbs in smooth circles along the inner parts of her wrists. Her voice drops to a lovely, almost whisper, melodic and somehow private despite being surrounded by others. "A blessing on you, my love," she says, and Tally shivers at the words. Her eyes water, and she squeezes Sarah's wrist tight just before the woman releases one to retrieve something from her pocket. Just as she had done the year prior, she uses a small stick to smudge a symbol across Tally's forehead. Last year it had been clay. This year it feels chalkier, and judging by its dark color, Tally guesses it is charcoal. A moment later, Sarah confirms it. She slips the stick back into her pocket and takes Tally's wrist again. "Tally Craven," she says softly. "With purifying and protective charcoal, I mark you with the sacred 7 points of the heptagram. In the past year, I have borne the blessing of being witness to your growth and expansion. You have been the rising tide of knowledge, your sight a gift that elevates not only your own learning, but that, too, of your fellow and sister witches. You have been the gentle foundation of hallowed connection, imbuing your relationships, whether professional or private, with attentive diligence and consideration." Tally all but swoons at the words, feeling Sarah's tight squeezes around her wrists punctuating each point. She holds her ocean gaze and tries to press every bit of love and connection she feels into the look, into her skin, into every point at which they connect. She knows by the softness in Sarah's eyes that she feels it. She understands. She knows. You have been the rare bond of trust, giving off yourself freely and loyally, both body and soul. The distinguished shine of honor in your military duties as well as your personal relationships. Valuing and showcasing communication, consent, and care in your choices and actions. You have been the delight and wonder of timeless magics, offering and embracing awe, adventureness, and wonder even in times of great uncertainty and sorrow. Tally knows those things, those uncertainties and sorrows, have truly worn Sarah down over the last year or so, watching as their enemies gain a foothold in their world again, as the hatred of their kind had been stoked into roaring flame. She knows Sarah had taken every comfort she had offered, almost begrudgingly, because Sarah Alder feels and has always felt it is her duty to carry those burdens, those of discomfort and concern. Tally has always allowed her the space for that, but gives where she can and delights every time Sarah leans into her giving. You've been the unwavering and infectious joy of new days and discoveries, Sarah says. Your delight in life and in loving elevates all witches, all persons, myself most of all. She squeezes Tally's wrist tightly, and Tally lets free another gentle sigh, Goddess, she wants to kiss this woman. And finally, you have been the much-needed and sought-after spark of inspiration. Your eagerness to learn, grow, and embrace inspires and motivates others to do the same. A rare gift to be cherished and nurtured. Sarah releases Tally's wrist again, to draw the tip of her index finger slowly along the 7 points she's drawn on Tally's forehead. I mark you with the 7-pointed star, because you are a shining example of all the layers that make life so worth living, and in you is the capacity to bring forth change, challenge, and chance. Tally feels her eyes sting with tears again as Sarah steps a bit closer and finishes her blessing. She wraps her hand around the back of Tally's neck. Her thumb slowly rubs back and forth along the soft skin behind Tally's ear. I have spoken, and my word is done, she whispers. And just as the words had done the year before, they summon a golden, sparkling mist to the air that only Tally can see. It's beautiful. It's riveting. Tally pulls Sarah the rest of the way into her arms and wraps tightly around her. She kisses Sarah's ear and whispers, Thank you, Sarah. She kisses her again. I love you so much. When she plans one last kiss in the same place, a little harder this time, she adds, And I'm going to show you just how much later tonight. Sarah chuckles and squeezes Tally's waist. I look forward to it, darling, she quietly replies, then helps Tally back onto her cushion and moves towards Rael. Tally's blood sings with joy and work and the goddess's own touch as Sarah begins another blessing, and Yule has never felt more festive. The night has never been brighter, the cold has never been warmer, and her heart has never been so full. When the blessings are finished, Abigail once again wastes no time in getting the game started. So now that we've left lesser topics behind, she says and briefly purses her lips, like your buck teeth? The words are barely out of Riel's mouth before she's wheezing and leaning on Gregorio for support. When Abigail's face all but combusts, she laughs even harder. Honestly, Bells, you make it too easy. You are seriously adorable, and buck teeth are nothing to be ashamed of. It just happens sometimes. Stop talking, caller, Abigail orders, and Riel only sticks her tongue out her and takes a ridiculous huge swig of her spiked hot chocolate. She promptly chokes on it, and Abigail laughs. Karma! She turns her attention back to Sarah. So, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, I think it's time to get this little party started. I see, Sarah says, amused. And what, may I ask, do you have in mind this year, Bells? Well, you see, Sarah, I am positively delighted you asked, because, in fact, I do have something in mind. Tally snorts as Sarah smiles and shakes her head. Of course you do. And it is as mortifying as last year's suggestion? Em asks. Because I'm going to drink more and talk less, if so. Drink more and talk more, Abigail tells them. Because this year I'm thinking truth or dare. Absolutely not, Em and Gregorio protest at once. The cackling biddies seem in agreement with them despite their amusement as they shake their heads at Abigail and look to Sarah to put an end to the affair before it can even begin. None is more surprised than Tally, however, when Sarah simply shrugs a shoulder and says, You're on. She turns her attention to Riel and holds out a hand. But first, I need a drink, and since you are in possession of my property, I'll be accepting said drink from you, Riel. Riel is way too excited about this, and she yanks the frankly enormous flask from where she's hidden it under the cushion just beside her and reaches for a goblet. She pours a nearly overflowing amount into the goblet and passes it carefully over. Let's do this, she says, as Sarah takes her first sip and follows it with a blissful sigh. Are you sure you want to do this? Telly asks, bumping her shoulder against Sarah's. You know Abigail will refuse to let anyone back out once they've chosen truth or dare. I assumed as much, Sarah told her. She took another drink, then set her goblet aside and squeezed Tally's thigh. Don't worry, Tally. I'm quite a big girl at this point. I can handle myself. And Tally doesn't know why, but something about those words from that mouth, paired with that ferociously high eyebrow arch, does things to her. So many things. She squirms in her seat a bit, but keeps her cool as she simply nods in agreement and motions for Abigail to go ahead. All right, Abigail says. You all know how the game goes, so I don't have to tell you. It's self-explanatory. So stop explaining and get on with it, Enid says, around the rim of her wine glass. And Raelle practically screams. She leans back until she's all but drunkenly laying in Enid's lap, and the biddy only pokes her cheek and giggles at her. Damn, Biddy's got chewed, Em says. And Gregorio snorts hard enough into his wine to accidentally inhale it. He chokes and coughs and laughs at once, and the sound is positively hysterical. So, I'll start then, Abigail says, ignoring the rib. Sarah. Oh, of course she chooses me, Sarah says. And Abigail grins like the devil. Truth or dare? Sarah immediately answers. Truth. Abigail pretends to think for a moment. But when the question fires out of her face, it's obvious that she had it keyed up and ready to go, likely for days, just waiting for her opportunity. Is Tally a top or a bottom? Tally's jaw drops so hard that she's surprised she doesn't feel it smack roughly into her chest. Abigail! Em and Gregorio choke on their drinks, and Raelle literally falls over with a hand cupped over her mouth in shock. Sarah, however, remains utterly calm as she takes a sip of her hot chocolate and lightly smacks her lips around the taste. Vulgar, she says finally, and Abigail has at least a pinch of decency, enough to look ashamed of herself, but not quite enough to take her question back. So? Abigail Bellwether, how dare you? Tally groans into her hands as she covers her face. And to think, just this morning, I sang the cleansing seed my mom taught me to help you clean the period blood off your sheets. Abigail nearly keels over as Gregorio wrinkles his nose in disgust and Em laughs until they have actual tears in their eyes. Tally! What? You deserve it! Goddess, you're so right, Abigail admits with a laugh. I totally do. She then picks up a cube of cheese from the nearest tray and chucks it at Gregorio. It gets caught in his greased hair and sticks there. Stop being such a guy. Periods are normal. I know, Gregorio says, but they're still gross. They really are, Raelle agrees. Like, just gross and shitty. And on that note, I'd like to take a moment to raise a glass to Sarah Alder, Blanche says. Were it not for your ridiculously old ass, I'd still be dealing with periods. Thank you, my friend. Sarah snorts and shakes her head. You are all children, she says, and the biddies giggle in a manner befitting the accusation. Oh, when was the last time you had your period, Sarah? Raelle hiccups once or twice through the question, and Gregorio carefully confiscates her drink. Sarah squints one eye closed as she thinks, then 1725, I think? Damn, you're old, Raelle says, and Tally promptly shoves her over. Raelle simply rolls with the motion of it, unapologetic and cackling. Okay, Abigail says. Enough period talk. Back to the game. Sarah, you still haven't answered. Sarah sighs, belabored and pointed, and Tally is certain she's not going to answer. She hopes she's not going to answer. At the same time, she can't help feeling somewhat curious about what the answer would be, because now that she thinks about it, she's not entirely sure which category she would fit in. If she's honest, she's not entirely sure what either category truly entails. She just does what feels good. Tally is a top, Sarah finally says. And once again, Tally's mouth drops open. So does Raelle's, and Abigail's, and Em's, and Gregorio's. What? Abigail practically shouts, while Tally herself asks, Really? Really, Sarah says, and the collective gasp rings the inner circle again. Tally Craven is a top? Raelle looks positively dumbstruck. No way! Our little dimpled baby with the happiest baby smile and most pleasing baby personality is a top? No, I refuse to believe it. It's always the ones you least expect, Em mumbles, brows raised, and the biddies all nod in agreement. What you believe won't change the truth, caller, Sarah says and smirks over the rim of her goblet, and that is all I will say on the matter. Tally is suddenly feeling and looking very smug, even as her cheeks burn hot and her wine burns even hotter in the pit of her stomach. She fights the urge to fan her face. Instead, she simply squeezes Sarah's knee and catches her gaze once, twice. She chews her bottom lip and forces herself not to ask Sarah to carry her off into the freezing woods somewhere for a quickie. But goddess, she is tempted. Now, I believe, it is my turn, Sarah says, and turns her attention entirely on Tally. Truth or dare, my love? Tally melts a bit at the affectionate term, something Sarah mostly only calls her in private, but the holiday has loosened her tongue and her cares, and Tally can't help but be a bit grateful. Truth. Sarah smiles at first. It is soft. But then it turns absolutely wicked as she asks, how would you like to abandon your coven here and run off into the trees with me? Once again, Tally's jaw drops like a rock. Not only because she's shocked Sarah would so blatantly ask such a thing in front of the others, but because she's now more than a little concerned that Sarah Alder can read her mind. Then again, her squirming hasn't exactly been subtle. More likely, Sarah's reading her body language. Damn her attentiveness. Don't you dare, Abigail screeches, as Sarah laughs heartily and pokes Tally for an answer. I would like it very much, Tally answers honestly, the skin of her chest and face ripening once more. We're absolutely not going to do that, you ridiculous woman, but yes, I would like it very much. I would love it, in fact. Okay, Tels, Riel chuckles. Reel it in. Is it, suddenly really hot in here, or is that just me? Gregorio asks, and M promptly smacks him in the face with a spare cushion. Is it my turn now? Tally asks, no longer able to avoid fanning her face. It was definitely hot in here. Riel, truth or dare? Dare. Of course you would pick dare, Tally groans. I can never think of anything. Hold on. Oh, dare her to streak through the squad, Lucy chimes in, and Sarah snorts roughly. Do not dare her to do that, Tally, she says. I am not keen on witnessing any of you fools naked. Rude, Rael says. You'd be lucky to get to see all this. I don't doubt it, Sarah chuckles. But still, I will pass. Word, Rael says with a drunken nod. Also, it's legit freezing outside, and I'm not trying to die of hypothermia. Sarah, you are such a prude, Lucy says, and Sarah rolls her eyes. I am professional. Professional? Lucy snorts. You just told everyone here that Tally is a top. Tally quickly fans her face. Focus, people! She thinks a second longer then. Okay, Rael. I dare you to tell us the most embarrassing moment you remember from your whole life. Oh, that's easy. Everyone turns as Anacastia's voice drifts in from the cold. She steps up into the gazebo in uniform, a wide smile on her face. Everyone cheers and raises their drinks as Anacostia plops up cushion down between Abigail and M and settles in. It has to be the session bonfire night, when you tried bliss the first time. Riel groans and dips her head into her hands. Anacostia, I told you that story in confidence. You told me that story in drunkenness, Anacostia laughs, and to cover your own ass. So don't act like you expected me to keep it to myself. It's too funny for that. Wait, Abigail says, and stares Rael down. She points between herself and Tally. How do we, your sisters, not know about this supposed session bonfire and drug use? Okay, now I need to know, Enid says, and Rael's groan grows into a full-on growl. Anacostia stopped me on my way back from Scylla's dorm one night last year, and she promised not to give me a demerit for being out after curfew and for being slightly tipsy, if I could honestly make her laugh. Something I learned from you, Anacostia says, eyeing Sarah, and Sarah raises her drink in acknowledgement. And the amount of dirt I now have on you is astronomical, she says. So mission accomplished, daughter. Someone better be telling me the session bonfire story with a quickness, Enid says. I am basically frothing at the mouth here. Enid, you are a terrible gossip, Blanche says, and Enid simply nods in agreement, proud of her nosiness. Okay, fine, Rael relents. So, when I was 15 or whatever, I went to this bonfire that some of the witches in the neighborhood were having. Mostly kids, teenagers or whatever. Basically a bunch of dumbasses who wanted to get plastered and act like fools. Naturally, Abigail says, and nods for Rael to continue. Right. So one of the girls has this tin of bliss with her that she stole from her older sister's bedroom right before she was called up, and none of us had ever done it before, so So obviously you were all idiots and decided to try it unsupervised, Sarah interrupts. And Raelle quickly nods. Yup, she says. Total idiots, the lot of us. She hunts around for her goblet only to remember that Gregorio had confiscated it. So she yanks her flask free and takes an enormous swig. Anyway, so I take the bliss, which I had no idea was supposed to make you horny or whatever. But yeah, it totally did. And Acacia snorts and cups a hand over her mouth, knowing what's coming, and suddenly, everyone is so invested in the story that no one moves or breathes, only waits. Shut up, Raelle says, throwing her a pointed look. So this girl I knew from around town, her name was Eliza, she was a year older than me, and I'd had a huge crush on her, for like at least a year. She drank a lot and said she needed to pee right around the time the bliss kicked in, and holy shit, it really kicked in. Like my entire body felt like it was on fire, in the best way. Anyway, she asked me to go with her to pee, because she didn't want to go pee in the woods by herself. So Avi, being the gentleman that I am, I was like, for sure, yeah. And I swear, the whole time I'm walking behind her into the woods, like, her hair is floating around her head, and she's all lit up in pinks and blues and golds, and here I am, high as shit, like holy hell, the goddess is giving me a girlfriend. Sarah barely contains a laugh, snorting around the effort to hold it in, and Tally quickly smacks her leg. So, we get a good ways into the woods, and Eliza turns towards me and unbuttons her jeans. Uh-oh, Joanna says. Getting spicy. Yeah, not so much, Anacostia mumbles, and Raelle groans again. Anyway, she says, forcing herself to keep going. She drops her pants and steps toward me and is like fully in my face with her floaty hair and her glowing eyes and her magical colors and whatnot. And I'm like, oh damn, I'm totally about to lose my V-card. And then she's all like, Raelle, will you fuck me? Telly gasps, and Sarah hides her face in Telly's shoulder, her own shoulder shaking with laughter. Telly shoves her again. You're embarrassing her, she whispers. But Sarah can't bring herself to apologize, because she can feel it coming. Whatever bomb Raelle is about to drop is already stirring amusedly in her gut. Raelle wipes a hand down her face and blows a cold bit of breath up over her burning cheeks. And 15-year-old me is way too eager, right? And painfully gay. So I'm like, absolutely, yes, 100%. I will fuck the shit out of you. Just like, tell me what to do, and I'm there. I'll do it. She stops and grabs the front of her top and quickly pulls it up over her face, so that she's fully covered from the other's view. Her voice is muffled by the material as she says, and Eliza gets this like horrible, confused frown on her face, and she's like, wait, what? I asked if you would fix me. She pointed out a scar on her thigh that she hadn't wanted to show any of the others and was like, you're a fixer, right? The words are barely out of her mouth before a collective groan sounds around the circle, and then one by one, the witches all burst into loud laughter. Sarah and Anacostia worst of all. Anacostia's laugh is unabashed, booming and deep and infectious, but Sarah, at least, tries to keep hers under control. She fully hides her face in Telly's shoulder, under the fall of her red hair, and positively vibrates with her quiet amusement. And that is the story of how I died, Raelle says, refusing to come out of her shirt shell. You're welcome and you can all fuck off. Aw, poor baby Raelle, Abigail coos. So thirsty. Yeah, Raelle says, finally emerging again. Then turns towards Anacostia. Quartermain, truth or dare? Truth. Raelle grins at her. Do you love us? Not a single damn one of you, Anacostia says, shaking her head. Sarah tuts at her. Now, Anacostia, the game is not called lie or dare, is it? I said what I said, Anacostia tells her, though the twinkle in her eye confirms otherwise. You don't like it? Give me a dare instead. Okay, Raelle says, perking up. I dare you to admit that you love us. As everyone laughs, Anacostia groans and rolls her eyes. Fine, she grumbles. I admit it. Ha! Raelle points at her. I knew it! Anacostia ignores her in favor of carrying on the game. I'm posing my truth or dare to all the biddies at once. The biddies perk up, happy to be included, and Blanche, the eldest, glances quickly to the others before answering, Truth. Is Sarah super annoying to be tied to? Oh, she's the worst, son, the shyest of the biddies immediately answers, and Sarah's jaw drops wide open. Son, Sarah says, pressing a hand to her chest. You wound me. Son chuckles and shrugs as the others jump to defend her. Just because she's annoying doesn't mean we don't also love her, though, Lucy says. She complains all the time. Oh, fucking constantly, Enid says. About everyone. Everyone? Tally whips toward her. Even me? Yes, Enid says, and Sarah groans and grumbles on her cushion. But only when you want to hang out with Abigail and Riel instead of her, and even then, she's mostly just complaining that she doesn't have enough free time to spend with you. Oh. Tally blushes and squeezes Sarah's leg. Sarah doesn't look her in the eye, still melting on her cushion. Well, that's kind of sweet, actually. But everyone else, Enid says, and Sarah groans again. Especially President Wade. And Witchfather, Celine adds, as the others nod. And Petra, Devon mumbles, and Abigail positively cackles. I complain about her too, she says, so I understand. As I was saying, Lucy holds up a hand to draw the attention back to her. She complains about everyone, and she calls us ridiculously childish nicknames. And she keeps a drawer full of plushies in her office that she throws at us when we fall asleep. Sarah's face has reddened, but she's grinny and ducking behind Tally again, and Tally is laughing so hard she's shaking. You don't really throw things at them, do you? That's so mean. Stuffed animals, Sarah says to defend herself. They're soft. But, Lucy says, she's also hilarious and vulgar and buys us little gifts all the time, and always makes sure we have our favorite snacks and hobbies available. Aw, Sarah, Tally says, swooning as she leans into her girlfriend's shoulder. You're such a secret softie. I am no such thing. You are too. Tally, I will have you know, I have not been soft since 1689. Tally snorts. Oh, okay. Sure, Sarah. Does this mean it's our turn to play? Enid asks, and everyone encourages her to go ahead. Okay, so mine is for Gregorio. Truth or dare? Gregorio perks up, drunk and sleepy, but smiling. Me? Oh, yeah, sure, truth. Do you still have a crush on Anacostia? All the girls scream and squeal, Riel especially, who is wheeze-laughing again, and Anacostia turns so hard she's likely to give herself whiplash. Say what now? Gregorio tries to hide his face in Riel's lap. I want to go to bed, he whines. And Riel pets his hair. Aw, Gigi, my guy, she says. Don't be embarrassed. Just answer, and we'll move on. His reply is pitiful and muffled by Riel's shirt. Yes. Anacostia gapes for a moment, but then her face turns smug, and she shrugs her shoulder. I mean, can't really blame you. Anacostia, Sarah says, tutting at her again. Don't tease the boy. Jeej, Em says, it's all good. Everyone has a crush on Quartermain at some point. This is true, Anacostia agrees, and the laughter that ensues perks Gregorio the slightest bit. He takes the hit, sits up red-faced, and takes a heavy gulp of wine. Fine, whatever, he says. Bells? Truth or dare? Oh, dare, Abigail says. 100%. I dare you to run over to the Bologna Coven gazebo and tell them General Alder wants them to report to mess hall right away. Abigail is on her feet in a flash, but pauses long enough to look questioningly at Sarah. I cannot condone such an act, Abigail, Sarah says seriously, and Abigail's eyebrows only rise a bit higher. Okay, but am I going to get in trouble for such an act? Of course not, Sarah says. It's you. Abigail cackles with glee and takes off into the cold night. A few moments later, Sekhmet watches as all 6 members of Bologna Coven go running towards mess in a clunky, drunken blob of a formation. Sarah laughs harder than any of the others, nearly falling over as she snorts into Tally's shoulder. You all don't know this, Tally says to her coven, but Sarah loves pranks. Do not, Sarah counters, but her enormous grin says otherwise. When Abigail returns, she looks utterly proud of herself. They didn't even question it, she says. I think they were too drunk. She shivers. Also, it's cold as fuck out there. Okay, my turn again, she says, as she plops back onto her cushion and takes a sip of her wine. Em, Truth or dare? Dare, Em says, and Abigail smiles. Thank you. I was getting so tired of everyone choosing truth. Em smirks. I'm a risk taker. I dare you to do that cheerleading lift you showed us last year, but you have to lift a biddy. Wait, Anacostia says. You were a cheerleader? Em blushes but doesn't deny it. Then their face scrunches. Wait, a biddy? Enid snorts behind Rael. Y'all know we got old people hips, right? I declare this too dangerous, Sarah says, nipping that in the bud quickly. However, I would enjoy seeing Em perform a cheer. Em groans, but stands and quickly runs through a cheer, their face uncharacteristically bright and joyful as they clap and twist throughout. Big G, little O, big G, little O, let's go, go. When they take their seat again, Anacostia is shaking her head at them. I'm embarrassed for you, Em, she says, and Em just nods, understandably. At least I got to pick up a lot of hot girls, they say. I was the strongest, so I always did lifts. Touched a lot of cheerleader butts. Sarah chuckles. Why is this coven so ridiculous? Oh, please, Telly says, and bumps against her. We're your favorite, and we all know it. And not just because you're boning our sister, Abigail says, and Telly chokes on her own saliva. Abigail! Abigail has 0 fucks to give. She only throws her head back and guffes. Truth or dare, Sarah? Em asks, and Sarah thinks for a moment. She looks to Tally. What should I choose, love? Truth, definitely, Tally tells her. There's no telling what these assholes will make you do if you choose dare. Wise advice, Sarah says, with a serious nod. Then, dare. The olive Rael has just shoved in her mouth goes flying into the fire in a wet chunk, and Telly laughs and points at her. Ha! It was you this time! Rael does not care, though, because all her focus has suddenly gone to clambering over Gregorio to Em. She waves Abigail over and yanks Gregorio in by his sleeve. Council! She shouts. Council! Abigail snorts and shakes her head, but joins the small group anyway, as Rael announces. This has to be good, you guys. They whisper to one another animatedly, as Anacostia leans towards them to overhear, and Sarah turns her full attention to Tally. Tally smiles softly at her, loving the bit of blush in Sarah's cheeks, the looseness in her limbs from the whiskey and the fun. She adores seeing Sarah this way, unburdened and so youthful. What have you gotten yourself into? She whispers, and cups a hand around Sarah's cheek. Sarah leans into the touch. I don't care, she says, and turns to kiss the inside of Tally's wrist. I just want to hear you laugh. Okay, Blanche says, clearing her throat. She bobs Sarah on the back of the head with her own cushion. Get a room, you two. Would love to, Sarah fires back. Does that mean we're done here? Absolutely not, Rael screeches. Not until you've done this there. She hiccups, burbs, then frowns. Okay, but then maybe, we should go to bed. The others laugh at her as she wobbles back to her own cushion, all at once excited and sleepy. Okay, Sarah says, turning her attention back to Em. She keeps a hand on Tally's thigh, gently massaging her with her thumb. What horrors await me, Em? The council has agreed, Em says, and Sarah rolls her eyes. As we have established, you are old. Really, really old. Like over 300 years old. Sarah rolls her eyes even harder, so hard it physically hurts. She waves her hand for Em to get on with it, as the biddies all try to bite back their laughter. We, the Council of Sekhmet, Em says. Minus Tally, of course, because she was too busy macking on you to help decide. Have chosen to give you the following dare. Good goddess, will I ever actually hear this dare? Sarah asks. Or shall I live another 100 years before I find out what it is you wish me to do? We dare you to do something you've never done in your entire life, but have always wanted to, Em says, and Sarah blinks. Her lips part as she processes the words, surprised and also a bit confused. Then, why? Because we care about you, Rael says simply, and Sarah physically bows back at the confession. She looks to Tally, who is now looking at her with the sweetest, most affectionate smile, and rapidly building tears in her eyes. You guys, Tally says, glancing around at her fellow witches. That's so sweet. Well, it might be, Rael says. Sarah's thing could be something absolutely horrible. Who knows? We just want you to get to do something you've always wanted to do, even if it's ridiculous. Like, for example, I've always wanted to stand at the front of a huge yacht and scream that I'm the king of the world, Titanic style. I mean, we don't have a yacht, but if that's your dream too, we can absolutely simulate that. Sarah chuckles, but Tally can see the effect the dare has had on her. She can feel it in Sarah's suddenly iron grip on her thigh, in the way her back arches and bows and arches again. Like she's trying to hold back emotion she isn't accustomed to sharing with anyone, but the privacy of her own bedroom and, occasionally, Tally herself. So yeah, whatever it is, Abigail says, even if you can't actually do it right now, you can tell us. We can talk about it, or, we can help you try to do it. Shit, I'm getting emotional. Anacostia mumbles. Let me just stop drinking before this gets out of hand. She sets her wine aside and fans her eyes. Okay, I'm good. Sarah looks around the small group then. Do y'all really want me to do this? They nod collectively, even the biddies. Telly lays a hand on top of Sarah's, drawing the woman's brilliant blue gaze down to the touch. She rubs her thumb gently over the back of Sarah's hand, encouraging, and Sarah takes a deep breath. Then, much to everyone's surprise, she sets Tally's hand aside and stands. Excuse me for a moment, please, she says, and without another word, she walks right out of the gazebo and disappears into the night. The biddies scramble to their feet to follow her, leaving Sekhmet Coven and Anacostia all staring after them. Shit, Rael says, crumpling. Did we fuck up? Telly's chest burns with concern, and she has to fight the urge to go after Sarah. She knows the woman well enough now to know that if Sarah wanted her to join, she would have asked. She looks to her sisters, her friends, and tries not to let her concern show. Maybe we should just wait and see if she comes back. She said she would only be a moment, Abigail says, encouraging. Maybe she just went to get something. Yeah, like something that has to do with whatever it is she's wanted to do forever, Gregorio agrees. Or maybe we made shit too real and now she's mad at us, Rael says and drops her face into her hands. Damn, you guys should not let me make decisions when I am this drunk. Nearly 10 minutes pass before Sarah returns. Just as the others have given up and are preparing to head off to their dorms to sleep off the night. Apologies for the delay, she says. I had to walk to the administration building and back. Telly frowns. For what? A gentle smile touches Sarah's lips, but there is something in her eyes. Anxiety? Trepidation? Tally, she says, instead of answering. Could I speak with you privately for a moment? The biddies are practically tittering behind her as Tally nervously stands and joins them all outside the gazebo. Sarah quickly sings a seat to encase them all in an artificial warmth that immediately soothes. Sarah leads Tally in a short walk away from the gazebo, then sings another seat to make herself and Tally invisible. What's going on? Tally asks. Should I be worried? No, Sarah assures her, and takes Tally's hand in hers. I know what I want to do as a response to the dare, but I also didn't want to spring this on you in front of an audience. I don't want you to feel pressure to answer with anything other than whatever truth is in your heart. Okay, now I'm really worried, Tally says with a nervous laugh, and Sarah smiles and squeezes her hands. Please, just listen, she says. Something I have always wanted to do in my life but have never done, whether it was due to my responsibilities or the very nature of how I still exist. I never considered attempting this. Mostly, though, it was for lack of the right person, the only person I could see myself doing this with. She sighs and rubs her thumbs over the backs of Tally's hands, and it seems utterly insane to imagine I could find such a person some 300 years into this extraordinary life of mine. But here we are, and here you are. You are that person, Tally Craven. Tally's eyes are watering like mad. Her stomach won't stop flipping. Her heart feels like a hammer between her eyes, along the slide of her neck, wild in her chest. Sarah? Sarah releases one of her hands to pull a long, thin cord from her pocket. It is weathered and aged, but still notably gold in color. Something I have always wanted to do in my life, but have never done, she says again, and carefully folds the cord over Tally's wrist. Tally, this cord bound my parents in marriage centuries ago, and now I would like to share that blessing with you. I would like to be yours, and for you to be mine in the most sacred way of our kind. If you are amenable, of course. Tally's throat has never felt so dry. Tears puddle along her cheeks as they streak and pool and streak and drop, and she can't make her tongue work until... Sarah, are you asking me to handfest with you? I am. Sarah gives her a gentle nod, a hopeful smile. Of course, we would need to plan a proper ceremony, but I'd wanted you to see how sincere I am. This cord is one of the most precious possessions I own, and I do not offer it lightly. This is not a whim, nor necessarily the product of a dare, Tally, though it certainly did give me the push I needed to finally summon the courage. But the truth is simple. I love you, and I would like to offer you my love for as long as you will have it. She lifts her hand to wipe tears from Tally's cheeks, then leans forward and presses a gentle kiss to Tally's forehead, right over the 7-pointed star she had drawn. When she meets her eyes again, she wears that same hopeful smile. Will you have me? Goddess, yes, Tally whispers, the words barely more than air, just a touch of wonder to warmth and possibility, then louder, stronger. Yes, yes! She carefully grips the cord so as to not let it fall, then pulls Sarah in for a searing kiss. Yes, I will have you, she says against Sarah's lips. For as long as you will let me. Forever, Sarah whispers into their next kiss, and Tally laughs out loud as the biddies all begin clapping and squealing excitedly behind them. When they finally return to the gazebo, Gregorio is all but asleep in Rael's lap until Abigail's unholy screech jerks him awake. Is that a fucking handfasting cord? Holy shit! Anacostia exclaims, and Sekhmet promptly agrees. And as they all pile onto Tally and Sarah in waves of confusion, thrill, and ultimately congratulations, Tally once again feels the spirit of the holiday in her blood. She feels the hope of a new year in the shine of the moon and turn of the season. The darkest night had brought her the greatest light, and never has she been happier to be a witch. Please find the fanfiction you just listened to on Archive of Our Own and leave the author some love. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, and we want to thank them from the bottoms of our hearts for creating these amazing stories and keeping the show alive.